Hola todos, how we doing? Let me see if I can answer some questions for our first module of marketing strategy. First article, CMO leadership for the 21st century. Question: planning for the future sounds easy, but is it really possible to know exactly what the future holds? Can't this be risky if they choose a particular path and the market doesn't go in that direction? Yes, 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 and yes. It is incredibly risky to plan in the future. None of us have crystal balls. We can't see into them. But the point is if you don't make some definitive plans to look ahead, you just don't know where you're going. You don't know. You have options. If best case scenario we have this, worst case scenario we have this. We're hoping for the average of the two at the very least, but you have to plan ahead. Hopefully, in a co-creation type value type of situation, if you're doing this back and forth with the market, maybe that's your hedge to know the difference of what's going to happen in the future, because at least you and your customers are planning the future together, or at least what you're expecting in the near future. Has there been any change in the tenure of CMOs since you wrote this article? To the best of my knowledge, I think it's gotten worse. Of all the positions in the C-suite, the CMO lasts the least. The CMO is not even guaranteed a space in the C-suite. There's a lot of firms that do not have CMOs. And usually the problem is that the CMO shoots from their hip. The CMO got lucky or had some strategy that worked in the past, and they go to another firm and they try to do it again, and it doesn't work this time because competition and customer behavior changes. So no, CMOs that's a very tough position to be in. Do you see disruptive models as a driving force of changes in the modern work marketplace? Well, yes. We are constantly seeing, especially on a more regular basis, new models of customer interaction. Now, I don't know specifically which this question is talking to disruptive in which way, but I keep seeing new technologies that are changing the face of social. I mean, Pinterest, which is only about 2.5 years old, changed the face of social. And now we have Instagram and Snapchat are probably the leading edge of what's happening in social at the moment. It's constantly changing. It is a driving force. Is it difficult for a company to transition to being a we research, we design products, and we ship it and you buy it, to the mindsets of including customers in 50%? Yeah, it's really difficult, and most firms cannot make that bridge. They cannot find that bridge to cross over. Particularly the more top-down theory X the management culture is in that corporation, the less likely they're going to be able to get to some kind of a co-creation of value mindset. Because in a top-down mindset, this is it. This is it. Are there less costs associated with having customers design the products? To the best of my knowledge, no. And I've alluded to this in previous questions. I think the costs are higher, but not necessarily the financial cost. It's the time cost, because this takes longer. How can you get rid of deeply rooted organizational politics and create a shared vision? Well, the shared vision part can come from a leader that does have a very high amount of transparency, that does delegate an awful lot down, does a lot of the strategic decision making with consensus as opposed from an authoritarian type position. But firms that have deeply rooted politics, politics comes in at firms because if you know something, you use that information to your advantage. Meaning, the organization's a little more insular, the organization's more siloed, and you could use information to your advantage. It's tough to have an organization that doesn't have some level of politics. If you can find a way to level the field where everybody's the same, well, then there's none of this politicking to get ahead. How can you deflect the criticism that comes along with being a CMO where everyone can weigh in on your very public work? Well, that's a great question. And you know something? I don't know if I have a good answer for you. You know, everybody is the Monday morning quarterback when it comes to marketing because, you know, it's in your face. You can see it. You know, oh, I have an idea for a commercial. Oh, I have an idea to make customers happy. You know, sometimes it seems very intuitive, but it is not. My suggestion really is to make a data process, a marketing research process where you're sharing the knowledge gained. If everybody's going to Monday morning quarterback anyway, you might as well tell them, you know, okay, this is all the information that we know. These are the decisions that we're making based on the information that we know. So people aren't second guessing something that you did because they didn't read the information that was shared to them. Apple doesn't seem like a company that focuses on co-creating by engaging customers for new product development, but they've been very successful. Is that a function of the brilliance of Steve Jobs? Do you think Apple will have to take a more co-creative approach in the future without Steve Jobs at the helm? During the years that Steve Jobs was absent, they seemed to flounder. Let's do these in reverse order. In the years that Steve Jobs was not at Apple, not after his death, the years after he got fired, so this was 85 to 97. Yes, Apple did flounder. And there isn't just one reason why they floundered. There is a multitude of reasons why. Mainly is they weren't relevant in the marketplace. Their products, you know, Microsoft and Intel had better products. Dell had better products than Apple. It's very simple. You know, and there's a multitude of reasons why that they had better products. Okay. In the years after Apple, after Steve Jobs' death, a lot of people think that Apple is struggling. I do not think they're struggling at all. They're the second or the most valuable corporation in the world. So, do you think Apple will have to take a more co-creative approach in the future without Steve Jobs at the helm? The answer to this is no. Apple, and this is the first part of this question, they are a top-down hierarchical firm. I doubt very, very much, even if they wanted to, that they would be able to engage customers for the innovation process. You know, that's not in Apple's DNA. It's not something that they've ever done in the past, and I can't see them doing it anytime in the near future. I think the reason why they've been successful is because most of the categories that they enter are not a category that they've created. It's a category that already exists in the marketplace, and they're doing a better job of it. You know, there are other companies that are further along in the curve. We're going to see some kind of an Apple wearable device. It won't be a watch, but it'll be some kind of wearable device. But Samsung already put one in the marketplace. Apple's just going to see what Samsung did. Now that the marketplace is a little more accepted of wearable technology with the Fitbits and all this other stuff, and we're going to see a wearable device from Apple in 2014, and it's going to be different than all the other ones that exist out there. That's Apple's MO. That's what they do. Co-creation through direct interaction with the customer seems like the traditional approach, but the ability to capture all types of data through mobile devices and the web allows companies to engage in data creation without customers even knowing. Okay, let me go back to this. I'm lost. Co-creation through direct interaction with the customer seems like a traditional approach, but the ability to capture all types of data through mobile, through web, through social, allows companies to engage in data co-creation without consumers even knowing that they have participated. Oh, that's a unique wrinkle there. Will consumers be engaged with a product through this approach? Okay, so in other words, all these articles that we've talked about this semester talked about co-creation of value with the consumer or the outside firm knowingly giving up information for the company to co-create with. But what we have now, especially within the last 12 to 18 months, is a lot of mobile devices and a lot of web-based devices that allow companies to get information without the consumers even directly knowing that the information is being lifted from their mobile device. Will consumers be as engaged with the product through this approach? Well, this is our conversation about recommendation engines that we will see in the Thaler article from next week. Google Now, for instance. There's enough successes out there that, there are companies that are doing a decent job of gleaning, it's not inadvertent, unobtrusive, well, that's not even a great way to say it. Yes, we have big data, and companies will be able to take the analytics from our phone and the analytics through our clicks and be able to give us better options. I actually believe that the direct in a combination of this is the best way to go. But Netflix seems to be doing a pretty good job, primarily through this. Google doesn't seem to be struggling too well, although, they tend to cross the line of creepy, as they call it. Hope that helps answer that question. Does the integrated marketing strategy come from the CMO or from higher management? Well, this is the C-suite. He or she is the chief marketing officer. The chief marketing officer, accounting officer, financial officers, operations, COO, CEO. This is where strategy comes from. Now, usually what happens in the C-suite is they decide, okay, we need new customers. Okay, we want to maintain existing customer relationships. That happens in the C-suite. Now, when it comes to integrated marketing communications, that comes from within the marketing function. That's usually determined by the CMO and his or her team internally. But the exact marketing strategy probably comes from the top, or a coordinated effort from the top. The use of media, integrated marketing communication strategy, that comes from within the marketing function. Doesn't creating communities like like-minded individuals take away from the diversity that is necessary in successful co-creation? That is a fantastic question. And why do I have a feeling that, given what you said in the second half of this question, that you read a Co-Creation of Value, Wisdom of Crowds book? There is a downside. If they're too like-minded and there's not enough diversity, then there's only so much value that can be added to the community. But I think it's the job of the marketing firm to add the diversity, either through different customer populations or research with populations outside of the like-minded individual population. Because it's the firm that should be bringing questions in to the like-minded individuals. It's a back and forth. But the like-minded individuals are only going to express what they know and what they want, not the diversity angle. That's a pretty cool question. Does relationship marketing, where consumers have a big input into the products, cause companies to cut some of its marketing staff? Not that I'm aware of. And I'm not sure why they would cut the staff, because if we have deeper relationships, you need more people to manage these relationships. What if the customer's idea results in an inferior product? Well, there are times where a company puts out an inferior product just to make sure that they maintain some particular market share. They want speed to market as opposed to product quality. And taking more time in R&D. Sometimes you can get away with that. A lot of times you cannot get away with that. Okay. Second article. This is the CEO of Best Buy, former CEO of Best Buy. Who are some CEOs do you think do a really good job on Twitter? To the best of my knowledge, I can't give you one. Usually it's the CEOs of smaller firms that pop up that are better on Twitter. Fortune 500 firms, Fortune 100 firms. Can't think of one off the top of my head that's really tweeting and not being screened through legal as much. Perhaps, if you want to point at someone, I would say Tony Hsieh over at Zappos. He does a pretty good job. When you think it's still very, very uncommon for CEOs to tweet. Very uncommon. When do you think it will become pretty much necessary for CEOs to have social media accounts, such as Twitter handles? I don't think it's necessary now for the CEO. Because if it's a corporation where the buyers, there's no value created in talking directly to the CEO. It doesn't have to be the CEO. It doesn't have to be the CMO. It doesn't have to be the individuals in the C-suite. But if you have a pretty strong web presence, think about Amazon. Amazon needs a social media presence because people need to interact with the service providers at Amazon. But not Jeff Bezos. You know what I mean? He's not on the front line. That's not his job. Even if he hears something, what is he going to do about it? So I don't think it's 100% necessary for the CEO to be doing it. But I think it's incredibly important that consumers have someone and there's a channel for them to deal with, to have interactions with a firm, to develop relationships. Can companies make policies for its employees to not use social media? Sure, they can. I wouldn't be surprised if there are some, particularly the legal field. You ever get an email from an attorney and after their name and the company's name, there's like 2 paragraphs of jargon? It's kind of funny. I bet you these already exist. But most of the time, there is a policy for the use of social media, and the policy is so detailed that it discourages people from using it anyway. So it becomes a de facto non-use policy. Question: how long will companies be able to last without social media? I think I answered that question up here. I think companies need social media. It just doesn't necessarily have to be the CEO. Are CEOs avoiding social media because they aren't familiar with how it works or to protect themselves from negative PR? I think they're avoiding social media because they have bigger fishes to fry. Social media and the function of social media was never part of their purview, never part of what they needed to do anyway. I think that's the bigger issue. Okay, next article. The new hybrid element in the promotion mix. And the reason why I would call it a hybrid element, because even though social media is mostly promotion, it also becomes part of the P product. It also becomes part of the P price and revenue. So it is a hybrid element in the 4 Ps, in my opinion. How do you walk that fine line of being outrageous in a good way versus a bad way? I'm not sure you can be outrageous in a good way. The fact that you're outrageous, I think you're already in a bad way. In most cases, the fact that you're being outrageous, it's just shock. The only reason you're being outrageous to get attention. You're not being outrageous to gain value. I'm not sure there's a good way to be outrageous. Is social media going to create a whole new definition of promotion mix? I think social media is this hybrid where it's part promo, it's part product, and it's part price. It's part place, actually, too, because of how it's being distributed on which particular. It's pretty interesting how digital media can be your product, and it can also be your revenue stream. That's pretty cool. It's hard to find that in other marketing vehicles. Maybe the catalog marketing is sort of like that way as well. Old school LL Bean type stuff. How does a company create a community centered around people with like-minded interests and desires? Well, I think it starts with listening. You know, you need to really think all the way back to the very first week of readings that we had. You know, that listening, that learning organization mindset. And then there needs to be the platforms for someone to communicate to a company, the channels. You know, how are they going to communicate? Is it only Twitter? Is it only through a proprietary platform? And then more importantly, in the hardest and third component of market orientation, so what if you build a platform for someone can tweet at someone within a corporation, but if none of that information is actionable because there's no one within the corporation to take care of it, handle it, and or share it with the rest of the corporation, then it dies there. If IMC is maximized, is it the most influential marketing mix to date from a historical perspective? Yes. 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 IMC is relatively new. I think it's the most influential. Well, let me take this back. Let me walk this back. Because if we look at the 60s and even the 1970s, not the 50s, but the 60s and the 70s and maybe even a little bit of the early 80s, television advertising, there really wasn't anything better. I mean, so many people watch TV. There were so few channels for people to watch. TV advertising, I might have to walk that one back. Let's put it this way. We have to do IMC now because consumers are so distracted. If we don't catch them and coordinate our promo efforts across multiple different promo channels, we're definitely going to miss our target market. Question. Would a company be ashamed to pay higher ratings on websites? Like, why would a company be ashamed to pay for... Well, you shouldn't pay for ratings. That's what they should be ashamed of. You know, in this Web 2.0 world, people should rate all on their own. We've seen the studies that 50% of the ratings on Amazon are shill ratings, which is unfortunate, but, you know, it might even be more than 50% depending on the category. What would happen if the conversation in a publicly driven forum turned against said company? Potential disastrous results. Well, I've sent you a couple emails so far this semester, and most recently was one on JP Morgan. JP Morgan thought that hey, let's do this Twitter thing, and let's have a conversation, engage. And they thought about it from a top-down perspective, and then, you know, the crowd just jumped all over them for all the improprieties that they did during the financial meltdown. So, yes, damaging. Viral marketing, is it worth the risk? It depends on your firm and the culture of your firm and what product and services you sell. That's the deal. That's the deal. In some firms, you can't avoid it. In some products, in some industries, you can't avoid it. Why do you need a ringmaster? I really like this term ringmaster, and I said that in the article video. How hard is it for companies to make this transition from being employee brand managers to ringmasters? Extremely hard, especially if the corporation is more Theory X and top down. You know, if you're going to be a ringmaster, if you're going to be more MO, you probably have to be more Y, and you need to have a culture of more Y. Can anyone be a ringmaster? Or only those who are charming and persuasive enough? I don't know where this charming and persuasive enough came from. I don't recall there being a particular, you know, I think being a ringmaster, you need to have the right cultural mindset. That's the most important thing. You know, charming, you could be Theory X and charming, and I don't think that's going to help you be a ringmaster. You can be really persuasive, and if you're Theory X, I don't think that's going to help you be a ringmaster. What kind of people would not make a good ringmaster? Someone who does not like to cooperate, someone that is high in politics, someone that only likes things done their way, someone who don't like to share the spotlight. You know. What do you do when low priority customers have high social media influence? Do these customers become a high priority? That is a very, very good question, and that could be a great academic article at some point. You know that? And, you know, I've listened to about 2 or 3 different podcasts over the last 2 weeks or so because clout is the lightning rod for this. And I don't know if this is the right answer, but right now companies are not risking it. If someone has a very high clout score, regardless of whether they're a low priority customer or a high priority customer, they're paying attention a little bit more to those higher clout scores. They really are. It's a fact. Is it possible for a company to embody more than one strategy at a time? Yeah, sure. I don't see why not. That's why you need a ringmaster. It's like going to a show and seeing more than one act. Can you expand on Cisco's real-time news feed and how it operates? Off the top of my head, this article is probably too old to even keep talking about Cisco's real-time news feed. So, and whatever Cisco had, it's nothing like what we could be doing now. And it's not Twitter. So, Twitter is probably the only real-time thing that we have on the web. I mean, as it happens, you can see it, you know, because one of the weaknesses of Google search is it's not real time. It's not real time. With many older individuals in top management roles, won't it take some time for them to come around to the idea of a ringmaster as opposed to a brand manager who has more long-term thinking in mind? I think it's less about older and more about culture. And you could be older, and if you're a coach, if you're a teacher, if you're Theory Y, you're going to gravitate towards this ringmaster thing quicker. What's your social media strategy? Just a couple good questions here, and we'll wrap this week up. Outside the example in the article, what are some of the other examples of social media transformation campaigns? That's a good question. I mean, we can think about the Super Bowl last year and how some of those firms took advantage of the blackout, particular Oreo, and that's an agency in New York City called 360i that did all that stuff for Oreo. There's a lot to it, you know, there's too much here. There's too many things that come off the top of my head. Is the predictive practitioner still an effective methodology? You know, I'm not sure if going forward this in and of itself is going to be enough. I really don't. I don't. Can all companies relate to these 4 specific strategies, or do some strategies not work for all companies at all? Now, these 4 strategies are not for every company. You have to think about the strengths and the weaknesses of your firm and what you can and cannot do. You might even have to modify all 4 of these to be able to work for your company. A question posed in the beginning of the article is if a consumer's influence should merit special treatment. What special treatment would a company give a customer that has a great social media influence? Is this simply a loyalty or reward program? Well, again, this goes back to clout and your clout score. I don't know if it's necessarily a loyalty or reward program the way we talked about loyalty and reward programs early in the semester. Early in the semester, we talked about loyalty and reward programs from a CRM kind of perspective. And a clout perk program is more of like a VIP package kind of a scenario. And we know that they're a VIP based on the score we get from a third-party source, but we don't see all the data to how that score happens. So it's not the same as having a CRM-type loyalty or reward program. I think it's more of a VIP-type scenario as opposed to just loyalty or reward. Because these are in the CRM kind of mentality. This is that top 1% or 2%. It's an extremely high skew. You know. Last article. Social strategies that work. Most companies don't succeed in online platforms. Why is this still the case? Simply, they do not have a strategy. They're throwing spaghetti against the wall to see what works. They're just trying things, or they're copying something that someone else does. That's why most companies don't succeed in social or digital. How difficult is it to convince a big company to adapt a social strategy where the goal is not selling stuff but rather making, foster, and connecting relationships? Whoa. It could be extremely difficult to get someone to adapt a social strategy if they do not have the culture of reaching out or being externally oriented in the first place. It's probably not going to happen, or whatever you do is going to be simple lip service. Are all these strategies only compatible with those customers who are already socially active? Primarily, I mean, I don't think any of the strategies that we walk through in this article talk to someone who's passively social. I mean, these are all people that are using these social channels. Do these strategies encourage people to get involved in social media and use it more? I believe they do. I would argue that they do. You know, it's easier to say they'll be, you know, the firm will be more effective in their use of social media, encouraging, in connecting with their customer bases. I think it's an easier thing to say, but I don't see why I would disagree with that statement. Can a company be successful at implementing both digital and social strategy? And if so, which company is a great model for doing so? What are the benefits or negatives of doing both all the same? Is it possible? Yes, you can do both all the same. I'm not sure that there's all that great of a, you know, digital and social. Digital means you're using electronic channels, and social means you're being two-way. Well, the only way to be two-way is through digital. Now, a lot of times digital could just be commerce without being social. Could have a website without being social on the website. We're seeing that less and less, though. We're seeing that less and less. If you have a really strong presence, you're probably going to have a really strong social presence. Digital presence, probably also leaning towards a very strong digital presence, social presence as well. How can a company create a platform to meet people for professional purposes? How does a company create a platform to meet people within their own firm or outside their own firm? You know, you could use Yammer internally. You can use LinkedIn to create a group. LinkedIn has fantastic groups that you can have employees of your firm and employees from other people's firms. You can talk about, I don't know, if Apple really wanted to start a group in LinkedIn about 3D printing. Apple isn't in the 3D printing space. But if that's something they wanted to learn about, sure, they could monitor and facilitate a group to see if they can glean some information out of it. When taking an unprejudiced look at target groups' social needs, what are some of the approaches you can take to ascertain what those needs are? Well, instead of thinking about it as an unprejudiced or unbiased look, I think you're going to have to find these needs and verify them in more than one way, and in more than one platform. You know, if you're only doing surveys you're not doing quant and qual surveys, you know, you have to think about looking at this from a 360-degree perspective. And instead of using the word unprejudiced, I think the word is biased. You've got to try to get an unbiased view. The best way you can. The only way to do that is keep collecting data from multiple different sources and angles, and keep doing it over time to make sure it stays consistent. Last question. It would seem to appear that some of the companies in your desire to develop a social strategy may end up losing sight of their business goals. They could, it depends. Have you seen any companies that meet customers' unmet social needs but fail to acquire new business and make more sales? I've seen a lot of companies, there's a ton of companies, that meet some social need but yet don't know how to create a revenue stream. Twitter is still struggling very much, if you ask me. They're not profitable. They're not profitable. Snapchat is not profitable. Instagram, I mean, I know Instagram's part of Facebook, but Instagram does not have a business model. They're trying, they're experimenting. You know, I think a lot of these companies out there, they decide to go for the market first and then figure out revenue streams later. And I'm not sure that that's really the best way to go. I know from Wall Street's perspective it is, but, you know, I would have the business model baked in a lot earlier than that, if you ask me. Okay, thank you, class. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your energy. I'm going to record another video.